Well, the tortured soul and lying mind of the most incompetent Treasury Secretary in history was on display once again today, this time in the White House. Scott Bessent began his comments in the White House press briefing room today by, of course, insulting Democrats in the House and Senate.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Good. I'd like to say it's a pleasure to be here today. This is my warm-up for my Senate and House hearings next week, so I don't want anyone yelling, reclaim my time.
And then he said something that would be a crime, and I mean literally a crime, if he said it in testimony to the House or the Senate, because lying to Congress is against the law.
President Trump has done something that no other administration is able to do. We have gotten the Iranians to talk about their nuclear program and to perhaps commit to not having one. That has never happened before. It had been off the table.
That would be criminal perjury in a courtroom, and it would be the crime of lying to Congress if Scott Bessent dared to say that in a House or Senate hearing where every Democrat, and I mean every Democrat, would immediately read to the lying Treasury Secretary exactly what Iran agreed to in writing in 2015 in an agreement negotiated by Secretary of State John Kerry on behalf of President Obama and joined by 5 other countries. And in that agreement, Iran put this statement in writing on page 3. Iran reaffirms that under no circumstances will Iran ever seek, develop, or acquire any nuclear weapons. Right there. Proof of the Treasury Secretary lying. Proof beyond any conceivable doubt. And Scott Bessent knows that the safest place to lie in Washington is the White House press briefing room, where not a single member of the White House press corps challenged him on that lie. Now, it is not clear how many members of the White House press corps have ever read Iran's written agreement to never develop nuclear weapons that Iran signed with the United States of America. Scott Bessent did something today that no other Treasury Secretary would have ever even considered doing. He played with counterfeit money publicly when he was asked about Donald Trump's latest perverse fantasy of seeing his face on a new $250 bill.
How long until we see your signature next to President Trump's face on a $250 bill?
Well, again, as Treasury Secretary, I have 2 mandates for U.S. currency. At present, no living person can be on U.S. currency, and the currency must say, "In God we trust." So right now there is proposed legislation in front of the House, in front of the Senate, to change the first requirement so that a living person, Donald J. Trump, could be on a $250 bill. So it's all in the hands of the, it's all up on Capitol Hill. So at Treasury, we prepare things in advance. So we have prepared in advance that if the legislation is passed, but we will stick to the law.
It's never going to happen. Congress has to vote to authorize a $250 piece of currency, and Congress would have to repeal a law that prevents the faces of living people from being on our currency, and then Congress would have to pass another law that put Donald Trump's face on that new piece of currency. And so we can say with confidence tonight that Donald Trump's face will never appear on a $250 bill, and in fact, Donald Trump's face will never appear on American currency ever, because the 60 votes necessary to do that in the United States Senate will never exist. And our self-clowning Treasury Secretary knows that, but he felt the need today to carry his public worship of Donald Trump to the point of now being locked in history as the buffoon who actually held up that obscene piece of counterfeit money today in the White House. But it worked. That moment distracted the White House press corps from asking more serious questions of that oh so eager, self-humiliating liar. He dismissed the question that he did get about the Trump slush fund to pay criminal Trump supporters who tried to kill Capitol Police officers and tried to kill the vice president in their attack on the Capitol on January 6th. The money from the Trump slush fund comes from the Treasury and is authorized by the Treasury Secretary to be sent to the Justice Department. Scott Bessent refused to say anything about that today, claiming that all questions about that should be directed to Donald Trump's acting Attorney General, who was his criminal defense attorney, Todd Blanche. No one even thought to ask Scott Bessent if he had already sent the money to the Justice Department. Scott Bessent previewed in his contempt for Congress at the beginning of his remarks that he expects his congressional testimony next week to be, shall we say, contentious. And we know who he will be fighting with, who he will be eager to fight with. He will be fighting with and insulting the Democrats on the committees. He will not be respectfully disagreeing on substance. In the Senate Finance Committee, there are 14 Republicans and 13 Democrats, and all 13 of the Democrats on the Senate Finance Committee voted for the Respect for Marriage Act in 2022. And in that vote, they voted to respect Scott Bessent's marriage to a man with whom Scott Bessent has 2 children, a lifestyle that was made legal by Democrats in the state of New York, where Scott Bessent got married in 2011, when that same marriage would have been illegal in Scott Bessent's home state of South Carolina, where he lives now and is legally married thanks to Democrats. Every Republican president during Scott Bessent's adulthood has put Supreme Court justices on the court who oppose marriage equality. One Republican-appointed Supreme Court Justice, Anthony Kennedy, joined with 4 justices appointed by Democratic presidents to achieve a 5-4 decision of the Supreme Court that made Scott Bessent's New York marriage legal in all 50 states in 2015. And 7 years after that, both of the Republican senators in the state where Scott Bessent now lives, in South Carolina, voted against Scott Bessent's marriage. And Scott Bessent will be testifying to one of those senators next week in the Senate Finance Committee, Tim Scott of South Carolina, who, along with Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, who has never been married to anyone, were among the 37 Republicans in the Senate who voted against respecting Scott Bessent's marriage in 2022. When Scott Bessent appears before the Senate Finance Committee, where he plans now to spend his time insulting Democratic senators, he will be appearing before 12 Republican senators who voted against respecting his marriage, including the chairman of that committee. And he will be unfailingly respectful to those Republican senators who are on record as disrespecting him before they ever knew he existed. And Scott Bessent knows. Scott Bessent knows how all of them voted on his marriage. Scott Bessent knows he will be looking at 12 Republican men and women who, as senators, voted to disrespect his marriage, and he will be looking at 13 Democratic men and women who, as senators, voted to fully respect his marriage, and he will choose to personally attack those 13 Democratic senators. He will not respectfully disagree with them on substance, as he could, as previous Treasury secretaries would. He will attack them as we have never seen a Treasury secretary attack senators before, because that is the mandate of Trump cabinet officials, that they attack Democrats when they testify to Congress. What is the truth in the tortured soul of Scott Bessent? How does he really feel when he looks up at the Senate Finance Committee and sees those people who he thinks are on his side now, who voted to disrespect his marriage and would vote to disrespect his marriage again, and those Democrats who voted to respect his marriage and would vote to respect his marriage again. How does he really feel? We will never know. And Politico is reporting today, in a twist that Donald Trump and his criminal defense lawyer and acting attorney general could not have foreseen because they don't know tax law well enough, Donald Trump might have to pay taxes, income taxes, on the $1.776 billion of the so-called settlement. Quote, some tax practitioners say the way that the fund, which acting Attorney General Todd Blanche announced May 18th, is structured, likely makes it an income tax liability for the president, potentially costing hundreds of millions of dollars. Effectively, a range of federal income tax experts said Trump appears to be the beneficiary of the $1.8 billion, even if the money is eventually routed to others through the 5-person commission responsible for dispersing the fund. Our first guest tonight, Democratic Congressman Jamie Raskin, the top Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee, who is also a constitutional law professor, released his top 10 reasons why Donald Trump's slush fund is unconstitutional.